Welcome to the Vitamin Professor podcast, brought to you by VRM Media, publisher of vitamin retailer and nutrition industry executive magazines, in partnership with Nutraland USA. I'm your host, Dr. Gene Bruno, Professor Emeritus of Nutraceutical Science and Chief Scientific Officer of Nutraland USA. Now, the purpose of this podcast is to help educate the dietary supplement industry about the science of nutraceuticals and other relevant topics. If you like what you hear and see, don't forget to like and subscribe. My guest today is Mats Johansen, the CEO of Aker BioMarine since 2015. He first joined the company in 2009 as Chief Operating Officer. Now, prior to his career at Aker BioMarine, Johansen served as the Chief Marketing Officer at Telefónica O2. He studied at Oslo University College and completed executive education at Columbia University. Today's topic with Mats is from skate parks to supplement aisles, the rise of whole body performance, supplement innovation, and science, and the initiatives driving the industry forward. Welcome, Mats.
Thank you. That was some intro there, but it's going to be a great talk.
I think so too. So let's start with this. You know, I've been in the industry for a while, and a lot of times, I would say most of the time, you have seen in the past people focusing on specific isolated health outcomes like joint health or energy. But it seems that consumers are now increasingly prioritizing whole body wellness instead of those isolated health outcomes. Why do you think that is?
I think it's part of the good old Maslow's pyramid. As your kind of basic needs are covered, you kind of start to expand on top of that. And people want to live their life to their fullest. And that means if you're young, right, you want to get maximum out of your training, you want to look as good as possible and stay as healthy as possible. And also as you get older, right, you want to make sure you have a, good senior part of your life. You can still participate with your grandkids and be active and not kind of, and basically get the full quality out of your life. I think that's basically what humans now are looking for across all ages.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I would also add that, one of the trends right now in industry is healthy aging and longevity. And I think that covers such a broad area, and sort of healthy aging is sort of wellness during aging. And I think that as people age, especially my generation, the baby boomers, we're the generation that kind of invented the dietary supplement and health food industries. And I think that the whole idea of whole body wellness is very, very appealing. Like you said, as grandparents, they want to be active with their grandkids. And I think that whole longevity area is something that is more of interest. I was at a conference, a women's conference called the Outlook on Women's Wellness that took place in New Jersey, USA, just recently. And it was one of the things that, women's health, not across the board, but also as they age. And I was interested to see that, the use of omega-3 fatty acids was one of the things that came up in there, just from a whole wellness perspective. So yeah, it seems that is something that is becoming more prevalent instead of just isolated health outcomes. Isolated health outcomes are still of interest to people for certain, but a lot more are interested in that whole body wellness. So yeah, I certainly agree with what you were saying there.
I think there's another element to it. There's another element to it as well, and that is information availability. So if you think about kind of how health has been managed in the past, it's been through your doctor and through medicine and drugs, which kind of been very negatively loaded about diseases and death and, seriousness and all of that, to now supplement information and science being available for normal persons. So if you have a ChatGPT or an AI model, right, anyone can be a scientist, not only you, Dr. Jean, right? Everyone can actually go up and learn about fatty acids or omega-3s or krill and really understand all those complicated, published studies in the past, right, in something easy to understand and tangible. And you can actually learn and understand about your wellness in a whole different level than what you could, let's say, 5-10 years ago.
That is a really good point. I was at another conference back in March in Anaheim, California, the Natural Products Expo, and I was on a panel discussion of the role of AI and clinical research in consumer perceptions. And to your point, Matt, consumers are using AI a lot to help them understand what's real and what's not. So there's all kinds of claims that are being made about supplements, some of which don't have any basis in fact. But now you can go on to an AI site like ChatGPT or one of those, and you could look at what the research is, get a good explanation of it, and see if it's real. And I think also, to your point, people are interested in taking a proactive approach and focusing on wellness in the first instance rather than having to focus on disease after the fact. And so if they can stay healthy now, they can do a lot to help prevent situations that are going to require them to focus on disease issues later. So
I think that's also going to change the way we do science for supplements, because the challenge been doing supplement science up until now is that, first of all, you need to do it in healthy individuals. You're not allowed to test your substance on someone that actually has a problem, right? So you have to document that it's working to fix a problem they in reality don't have, right? So you have to find people that almost, they don't have enough big problem to be sick, but still have a problem, right? And so that's number one. And number two, you need to match the dose with what you're going to put on the shelf. And because of cost, you want to keep the study short, so, and that's a problem to get enough efficacy with a small dose, in a short period of time. So I think now AI, they don't look at the regulation from that perspective. They're just going to look at data, scientific data. So now if you're an ingredient company, all of a sudden it starts to be interesting to run studies in sick population, even if you can't use that on a label or a label claim, but it goes into the database of science for AI models to pick up. And the same, I think you can do bigger dosing, in the studies to get better signals, in the study that you're running. So I think it's going to change the way we do science in supplement industry, which I actually think is going to be for the better.
I agree. Just last week, I post articles sometimes on LinkedIn, and I posted an article on something I thought was interesting that relates to what you're saying. I talked about the dietary inflammatory index. So for people who don't know what that is basically a scientifically validated way of measuring the different foods that you take in and their capacity to increase your inflammatory load. Certain foods are pro-inflammatory, certain foods are anti-inflammatory. And for people who eat a lot of refined carbohydrates, concentrated sugars, a lot of saturated fats, trans fats, and many other things, that can create more inflammation. Now, you don't have to have a disease to have higher inflammation levels. If you do have a disease with inflammation, now it gets worse because of your diet. But conversely, certain ingredients, and one of them were the omega-3 fatty acids, are highly anti-inflammatory, and that's measured as part of this dietary inflammatory index. And so people who don't have a disease state that with a lot of inflammation still, it's of great concern to say, hey, what can I do to remain healthy and have the kind of diet and use the kind of supplements that can help reduce my total inflammatory load? And that's something I think that's becoming more prevalent, because even without an inflammatory disorder, research has shown that if you have pain of different types, it gets worse if your score on the dietary inflammatory index is higher. So again, things like omega-3s and the right kind of diet can make a difference. So yeah, very good. So let me go to the next question. Something a little different here. What can high skill, high impact sports like skateboarding teach us about resilience and long-term health behaviors?
Yeah, good question. You made an intro about me there, and you talked about my executive degree from Columbia University, but I got that late in life. So when I finished high school, I dropped out of school and started skateboarding full time, and I did that for 3 years
Ah,
between the age of 18 and 21. And that was the only thing I did until I was so broke, finally had to get the job, and a career started. But what it taught me, I mean, first of all, I mean, it teaches you about taking risks, because
yeah,
basically skateboarding and many sports, it's about trying something you haven't been able to do before. That's the only way you make progress. You need to try something you haven't tried before, so now you can master that and go to the next level, right? So as a skateboarder, you actually learn that that's the only way to have progress, is you have to take some risks, and at the same time your body is your equity. If you take too much risk, you break a leg, or can get more seriously injured and you can't skate anymore. So skateboarders actually become very good at balancing taking risks and being careful. So and at the same time understanding you have to take some risks to move forward. And I think that same goes for our industry, right? We have to take risks, meaning we as a company, we have to take risks in starting clinical trials. We don't know if the results will be positive or not, but we have to try. And we have a
that's right.
theory, and we have enough knowledge to believe we can do it. But we have to take that step and risk it. And we build our company culture, I would say, around that kind of risk-taking mentality, because I think for most businesses, they're actually trying to do the opposite, trying to force their organization not to take risks. But it's actually human nature to not take risks. We are designed as humans not to take risks. So there's studies actually showing that we value losing something twice as gaining the same. And probably comes from when we were living in caves, and if we got extra food, it wasn't worth anything because we couldn't put it in the fridge. But if we lost our food, we could die. So it's inherent in us not to take risks, and that's why I think leaders, they play a very important role in our industry to take some of that risk and move things forward.
I love that, Matt. And I love what you said about taking risks with clinical research. Because a lot of times, maybe you did an in vitro study, maybe even an animal study, but we don't know if that's going to translate into benefits in humans. We just don't know. We can speculate that it will, but we don't know for sure. And to take that step and to spend the money that it costs to do a good clinical study is a risk. But and then at the end of it, you go, okay, is it going to come out the way I hope it will? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it does. Or maybe something else comes out that you didn't quite expect, and now you have a whole new angle that was unanticipated. But the bottom line is, you're right. You've got to take those risks, because what are you going to find out? And if you don't take the risks, and part of the benefit is once you do, and you get some good data out of that, not only does it make your product, your materials look better, but then those companies who are using those materials in their products are able to make good claims, good structure function claims about the material that's going to help them sell it. It's going to have credibility with the consumer. And when you trace it back to the beginning, it all comes to taking a risk. Let's do the research. Let's do the study. Let's see if we're going to get the kind of outcomes we hope we will, or are we going to get something else? And even if we don't get the outcomes we think we will, we've learned something from that, and maybe we've learned something about how to do a better study next time. So, good for you for being one of those companies that says, and one of those leaders that says, we got to take the risks, because it's so important, so important. Okay. So, since we talked about sports, tell us, what are omega-3 solutions like krill oil? Why are they gaining attention in performance nutrition?
Yeah, and I think you talked about it a little bit earlier about inflammation,
Yeah.
which is a key, what do you call it, part of our lives and the way we live, and that we want to try to keep as low as possible. And the same thing happens when you do sports, right? You will put your body through some strains, and through that strain, you will cause inflammation in your muscles, in your joints, even in your heart, right? And your immune system will try to clean it up and fix it up. But it's all about how you can try to reduce that inflammation as much as possible, so that you can get back into normal performance as quickly as possible. So we did a study many years ago for QRILL, which was quite interesting, where we looked at triathlon athletes, those Ironman competitors, which are, these extreme kind of swimming, bicycling, and running, which is a big strain on the body, right?
Oh,
and
sure.
they looked at what is the best precursor for success in that sport. What are the things you can look at to determine, will this person here be a winner in this sport or not? And one of those precursors that came up, and actually came higher than talent in terms of the importance of actually, are you going to be successful in this sport or not, was what we call the omega-3 index. So basically measuring how much omega-3s they have in their cell membranes to moderate or modulate the inflammation. Because basically what happens if you have a high intake of omega-3 as a triathlon athlete, you will quicker recover from your hard training or from your competition, and can get quicker back into hard training. And that's actually the factor that makes it good. So it's not kind of the krill oil itself that kind of makes you stronger or faster or anything like that. It just puts your body in quicker, back in shape to train hard again, and through that get stronger and actually win. So
Is that primarily a function of the really significant anti-inflammatory effects of the omega-3s in the krill oil, or is there some other mechanism?
Yeah, so that's part of it, and we can talk later about what's different with krill oil omega-3 versus others.
Yeah.
But that's part of it. But also in the omega-3 molecule from krill, you also have choline, which is another essential nutrient, also connected to, from signal in the brain, and also in some kind of other parameters when it comes to recovery, plus the antioxidant, astaxanthin. So you have like kind of this 3-pack combo into one product, on top of being like this very efficient form of omega-3.
Makes sense. I certainly have formulated before with both choline and astaxanthin, as well as krill oil. So good points. So could you tell us about any more recent developments in clinical research?
Yeah, so for us, we have done close to 60 clinical trials now in humans. So
wow, that's amazing.
We're very committed to doing that, and we probably have, I don't know, three to four new ones every year, trying to build a body of evidence. And as we learn more and discover more, and are able to build more and more documentation for why this is an excellent source of nutrition. And I think we will get more and more paid for it in the future through these AI models we talked about a little bit in the beginning. But what we've been focusing on lately is longevity. Not the only one, right? But we've been really focusing on how can we increase and enhance the quality of life as you get older. and there's been different kind of parameters. One thing is looking at brain health and elements connected to that, but we've been focused lately on the physical aspect of it. So basically, how can you keep your muscle mass, as you go past 40?
Yeah, sarcopenia and helping to maintain muscles for there. Yeah.
How can you reduce pain in your joints? And how can you reduce pain in your muscles and keep the functionality of your muscles at a higher level as you grow older? So we've been studying that for some years now, let's say the last 5 years, and we have several studies, including one on chronic muscle pain, which just came out a couple of weeks ago. 40 people in one study actually looking at how QRILL reduces chronic pain, basically as you get older, which is a problem while people keep less active, and that has a knock-on effect on quality of life in general. And we did a similar one on muscle strength, where we actually measured both strength and the size of the muscles. If you actually just took a QRILL supplement, right, just a small capsule, you will be able to develop size of your muscle and actual strength as you pass 60 years old. So some really interesting data there coming the last couple of years.
That's tremendous. I don't know the exact numbers over in Europe, but in America, if you look at population, the aging of America is such that very, very quickly we're going to have the majority of people living in America today are going to be, senior citizens. They're going to be older, and they're going to be the old will outnumber the young, and as a result of that, this is an area of great concern. As we get older, we have more aches and pains, and even, certainly being physically active and having a good diet can help a great deal. But you still have more aches and pains even then. Maybe not as many as your counterparts who aren't doing the right stuff physically, but you have it. So anything that you can do to help that situation, and something simple like just, taking a little soft gel with the Superba Krill oil, it seems like a no-brainer, just a very simple thing to do to help that situation. So I didn't realize you had so many studies on the Superba Krill. That's fantastic, and the new study on chronic pain is so very, very relevant to concerns today and the aging population. So good on you guys for doing that study. That's fantastic.
And I still think it has that knock-on effect, meaning that, okay, so we're able to reduce your pain, and as by reducing your pain, you become more active. It's easier to get out of the chair, go for a walk, go to the gym. And when you do that, you get stronger, and the likelihood of you tripping over in the stairs is lower, and, breaking your hip bone, so it has this massive knock-on effects that also is great benefits for society in general.
Excellent. So listen, you were talking earlier about your background in skateboarding, and I asked a question about that. And just to expand on that a little bit, what can supplement brands learn from the mindset and the culture of skateboarding communities?
Yeah, I think it's about that risk-taking mentality, and we try to learn from that culture as much as possible, because the way a skateboarder or a snowboarder that's professional will look at it is that their biggest fear is that next year some new kid comes out doing something no one has done before and taking over the throne as the best in the world, that they're all competing to be. And it's a little bit the same in our industry, right? I mean, our biggest fear, or should be our biggest fear, that next year some new kid, meaning a new company, comes out with a new ingredient, with some fantastic results, and basically take over the categories that we have invested so much in, through those years. And that's why it's so important for us, even if we have 60 studies, we keep running new studies, so that we will be the new kid, to find those new studies and those new ways of actually using our ingredient in the future. So I think just kind of having that mentality and bringing that into business, I think it's very healthy.
Very good. So, we tend to assume sometimes that people, because of our industry, everybody sort of understands, what QRILL is all about, but not everybody does. So let me frame this question for you. The International Society of Sports Nutrition, a group that I'm very familiar with and have friends in, they did some good research, and they were showing that higher intake of omega-3 fatty acids can enhance endurance, reduce muscle soreness, support cardiovascular health and immune health. What makes Superba QRILL a good choice as a source of omega-3s?
So a couple of things. Let's start with the kind of clinical aspect of it first, and that is that the omega-3 molecule is different from the one you will find in fish oil or algae oil and the normal sources of omega-3. And that is that omega-3 molecule is bound to something called phospholipids. And in the cell membranes of all our cells sits phospholipids. So all the cell membranes in our cells, in all the cells in our body, has a membrane of phospholipids. And for an omega-3 to enter into those cell membranes and have its health effect, it needs to be in that phospholipid form. So if you took a fish oil supplement this morning, it will go to your stomach, into your blood, into your liver, get repacked into phospholipid omega-3 in your liver, and then sent into your cells and being taken up. But omega-3s from fish oil are fats. So they are a source of energy, source of fat storage, and on that path, through the liver becoming packed into phospholipid omega-3, gets burned, gets stored, and actually doesn't reach the cell. While in QRILL, it's in that phospholipid form from nature. So it doesn't go through your liver at all, just goes straight, into your blood, into your cells. And as a result, about 3 times more EPA and DHA ends up in the cell membrane compared to traditional sources of omega-3. So it is the most efficient form of omega-3. And then on top of, you get the benefit of choline and astaxanthin, which is connected here. So that is kind of the clinical benefit. And the more, call it consumer-friendly benefit or whatever you call it, is the fact that this phospholipid part of the molecule is water-soluble. So imagine if you take fish oil, put it in a glass of water, it will float to the top. The same thing happens when you take a fish oil capsule in the morning, goes to your stomach and will float on top of your stomach. And 60% of all the consumers, they will have this fishy aftertaste the whole day from that kind of fat sitting on the top of the stomach and giving that aftertaste. While QRILL is in that phospholipid form, being water soluble, so once it reaches your stomach, it mixes. And you don't get that fishy aftertaste. So much very, very simple for consumers, right? I want to take an omega-3 supplement, but I don't like that fishy aftertaste. With QRILL, you don't get it. And then number 3, which is very, very on time now, right? And that is, it is a stable, sustainable source of omega-3, because actually, as we speak, the world is about to run out of omega-3. And I think we're just heading into a crisis later this year, where basically you won't find your omega-3 supplement on the shelf anymore, because the total available omega-3 is probably going to be half of what it used to be. So QRILL is coming from a different source that's, largely available, which do not have that supply chain disruption, which we can talk more about.
Interesting. That's going to be quite the development as that progresses. So, what would you say if you have a consumer and they're interested in taking the Superba QRILL and they're just taking it as part of their general wellness program? They don't have a particular disorder or anything. What would be a good basic dose to take of the Superba QRILL for most people for just maintenance kind of approach? What would you recommend?
So very good and very interesting question, actually, because I would say the general kind of dose is 500 milligrams, even maybe as low as 300. So a very small capsule because it's a more effective way, as we talked about, to deliver the omega-3s. But the way I would do it, and again, this is hard to put on a label, but if once you start taking the supplement, because it will accumulate, even if you take 300 milligram every day, will start to accumulate over time, slowly accumulate, and you get more and more benefit the longer you take it. Is that I would then typically go with a high dose in the beginning to load up. You know, if I'm new in omega-3 especially, if I haven't taken omega-3 supplement, I would take a high dose for the first couple of months, you know, to just load my levels up.
What would that be? High dose? Would that be like 4?
I would take 1 to 2 grams. Yeah, 1 to 2 grams for a month or two. But of course, depends how much fish you eat and so on. But 1 to 2 grams for a month or two, just to get my levels quickly up, and then keep on the 300 or 500 milligram up there.
That seems
and of course, this is the type of complexity which is very hard to tell consumers, right? Because you're going to go there and you could just have one recommended dose, no matter what type of consumers you are. But that's how I would do it for omega-3s.
Excellent.
In general.
Yeah, very good. Now, so here's another. I have to tell you, I've asked some questions during this podcast that I've never asked before.
Okay.
And so some of them because of the skateboarding background, and so I find that absolutely fascinating and a lot of fun. But I have another question to ask you. So the Norwegian Board Association is extending its collaboration with Aker BioMarine. Tell us the significance of this development.
Yeah, so that's a partnership we've been having now for a couple of years, and so basically we are the main sponsor for the Norwegian national team in skateboarding, in surfboarding, and snowboarding. And in snowboarding, we are actually one of the best nations in the world. So it's kind of top-notch athletes. And we do it for 2 reasons. One is that we are culturally, as an organization and together with our customers, learning how to take risks and using them as inspiration for how you evolve and develop and have progress as a skateboarder or a snowboarder. And we have like a fun saying that we need more skateboarders in the boardroom, you know. Just to play with words there. But that's number one. But number two is that we're using them as ambassador for the new target group or buyer group of supplements. Because when I started in this industry, which is 17 years ago now, the typical buyer of our product was female age 60. That was a typical buyer of a supplement and specifically omega-3, right? And that is changing now, right? It's still a big group there, but you're starting to get a quite big group of, call it male 20, which are spending quite a lot of money on different type of supplements to study well or do sports or go to the gym or form at work, you know. And so there's this new group of supplement buyers that we're trying to reach through this kind of, call it cool people, you know, the skateboarders and snowboarders, you know, kind of our people that young generations look up to, and they want to try to copy what they do, and they will be good ambassadors to start to open up the world of supplements for that target group.
Excellent. Well, Mats, let me ask you this sort of final question. Do you have anything that you'd like to add to this discussion that we haven't already covered? Any final thoughts or words you'd like to share with the listeners?
Yeah, I think we should spend a few minutes on the omega-3 supply crisis, which is about to happen.
Yeah, please do.
Because I think a lot of people out there are not aware of what is about to happen. But the situation is that the most of the omega-3 in the world, most of it comes from the oceans. There's a little bit of algae production on land, but that's just a fraction of the total omega-3 production globally, coming from wild catch fisheries globally. So that's pretty constant, or has been pretty constant. You know, the amount of omega-3 produced globally, and then the biggest buyer of those omega-3s is the aquaculture industry. It's shrimp farmers in Southeast Asia in South America, and it's salmon producers in Europe mainly. So they are consuming 80% of all omega-3 being produced globally. And they're just using a little bit, like 2% of the diet of a salmon would be omega-3. And the salmon, as an example, will die unless it has omega-3 in its diet. So it's impossible to farm salmon without putting omega-3 into it. And the salmon industry and the shrimp farming industry is growing 4 or 5% per year. So basically, by nature, they're buying 4 or 5% more omega-3 every single year. And they're already buying 80%. Then in parallel of that, you have the big pharmaceutical products for hypertriglyceridemia, for high triglyceride levels, Amarin and Lovas and so on. They just came off patents. So the cost of those drugs dropped 80%, meaning now the uptake of these drugs are skyrocketing because now it's a cheaper solution to manage, through doctors, cardiovascular health. So basically what we see now is that the demand for other demands than supplements are just eating into our category, and they are actually able to pay more than what we are in the supplement industry. And then you top that with something called El Nino, which is basically heating of the waters, which is happening as we speak, which means that the biggest source of omega-3 fish oils today from Peru is being banned. So they're not allowed to fish that anymore, anchoveta in Peru. And as a result, there is basically no omega-3 to be bought. And now these are for the fish oil manufacturers buying these crude raw materials. So it's just, I think we're talking 3 to 5 months before the brands, the retailers, and finally consumers will start to see that I can't buy my favorite omega-3 anymore. And I think this is a huge crisis. It's not only about business, it's about the importance of omega-3 in people's diets. And I think a lot of brands out there, if you have listeners out there that have omega-3 in their portfolio of different products, they have to think about their portfolio strategy to look at alternative sources for omega-3 and be ready for that crisis because it's coming. It's coming very fast.
Wow, that is that's very powerful, and that is something that if brands are currently selling a lot of omega-3s, especially from fish oils, they got to be really aware of this and start planning ahead of time, because there's a change coming, and that's a huge change. So thank you for sharing that with our listeners, Mats. All right, well, folks. So first of all, Mats, thank you very much for being my guest today on the Vitamin Professor podcast. And to our listeners, if you liked what you heard and you like what you saw, please don't forget to like and subscribe. So thank you, and see you next time on the Vitamin Professor.